tears and sweat, we have built our captor's prize. And with every whip that cracks, we've tasted our demise. But our God has promised a deliverer will rise. He will lead us far from here into a paradise. And yet with every generation gone, he never comes. And we fear what life will hold for our daughters and our sons. Rejoice, rejoice, let your hearts burst with joy, with joy, with joy. For your God above has heard your cry, and a child was born tonight, so praise him. Suffered many years in a land that's not our own, and we pray so fervently that our captors send us home. We have tried to hold on to the hope of our release. By the God of our fathers, who will one day bring us peace. But with every passing year, our faith has grown more dim, and we wonder if our children ever will see him. Rejoice, rejoice, let your hearts burst with joy, with joy, with joy. For your God above has heard your cry, and a child was born tonight, so praise him. After many years of plenty, once again our freedom's gone, and this current emperor is the mightiest bar none. But the Lord has spoken through the prophets of old that Messiah will come and he will conquer our foes. Why then, after centuries, has God left us alone? Will we ever have a king return and take the throne? Rejoice, rejoice, let your heart burst with joy, with joy, with joy. For your God above has heard your cry, and a child was born tonight, so praise him. Everything that we can dream or imagines within grasp, finally the riches of this world are ours at last. Yet the taste of our prosperity has still not satisfied. Is there more to this life than all these pleasures we have tried? Maybe if we souls for saddest, 'cause the price is not too high. Rejoice, rejoice, let your hearts burst with joy, with joy, with joy. For your God above has heard your cry, and a child was born tonight, so praise Him. Rejoice, rejoice, let your hearts burst with joy, with joy, with joy. For your God above has heard your cry, and a child was born tonight, so praise Him. So praise Him. Oh, praise Him. So I never talk after videos. I never talk about what the song's about. I usually type this in the description. But with this one, I thought maybe I should say something on the video because most people don't read the descriptions. And I'm not sure how obvious it will be what the song is about. So I wanted to say what my thoughts were when I wrote the song. Basically, the idea was that when Jesus was born at what we consider Christmas time, the night that he was actually born, the average Jewish person, Hebrew person, Israeli person living in near Bethlehem and Jerusalem and in that area, they didn't know that he was born. And even if they heard that Joseph and Mary down the street had had a baby, they didn't know that he was the Messiah. So they were living in a time of oppression under the Roman government and the Caesar and all the local leadership that the Romans had in place in their area, and they were being oppressed, and they were it wasn't a good time for them. But what they didn't know was that right there in their midst, the Messiah had come. He didn't come in the way they expected. They expected someone to ride in, some warrior on a horse that was going to overthrow the evil government that was oppressing them. But instead he came as a little innocent, fragile, helpless baby that needed other people to take care of him for a little while. So when the Messiah that had been promised for centuries through all the prophecies, God speaking to his people, giving them hope, giving them assurance, I'm going to rescue you, all of those prophecies that had taken place for hundreds of years, well, when it finally came to pass, they didn't recognize it. And so, again, the thought for me was, Christmas time, we celebrate, looking back 2,000 years, we celebrate this time of Christmas because we know that Jesus, the promised Messiah, has already come. But what about the people that during that season, they didn't call it Christmas, of course. They didn't recognize anything worth celebrating. It was just another day. They weren't excited about the holiday season, winter, and all the festivities. Those are things that we celebrate now because Jesus came. We look at this time of year as a positive, happy, joyful time. We give gifts to loved ones and friends and family, and we celebrate relationships and all the parties we have and all the decorations and lights and food, special food and all that stuff. They didn't do any of that. For them, it was just another week, just another day, and just another night. And so as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me that just like Jesus came at that Christmas time of year, even though they didn't recognize it as Christmas, they were in captivity, and their Messiah came, their deliverer came. They just weren't aware of it yet. And then I started thinking, I think it was about 2,000 years before that. It was 2,000 years ago for us that Jesus came, but 2,000 years before that, the same family of people, the Israelites, were in slavery in Egypt for a period of a little over 400 years. And they, the ancestors of of the people that were alive when Jesus was born, their ancestors had been crying out for generations for a deliverer, for a rescuer, and God was promising to deliver them too. Now, it wasn't Jesus at that time, it was Moses who came. And he, being a shadow and a type, symbolic of Jesus and what Jesus would come to do later, but Moses also came as a deliverer and also came as a little baby that couldn't rescue the people immediately the day he was born. And so when I started seeing the connection between those two, I then started thinking about, well, there's another time in the Jewish history, there's actually a few different times, but specifically I was thinking about the Babylonian exile. And so the Babylonian exile, the people, again, this time it was for a period of about 70 years, that they were overcome by the Babylonians and led out in chains and just drug away for great distances across long stretches of land to this foreign country where they were just being kidnapped and stolen to. And for the next few decades, they're crying out and praying for a deliverer. Well, turns out in a similar way with Moses and with Jesus, the person who God had chosen to rescue them, he wasn't even a Jewish person. He wasn't even a believer in God. God prophesied like 150 years, I believe, before this person was born. God prophesied through, or spoke through the prophet Isaiah about a man named Cyrus who is going to rescue his people and deliver them out of their captivity and exile in Babylon. And so it's just interesting to me that you have around, let's say, a Christmas season, even though if it's not acknowledged as Christmas or labeled Christmas and we don't think of it as a joyous Christmas time, but around Christmas time, that time of year in Egypt, the people are in slavery and they're burdened and oppressed and everything is not looking good for them, and they're crying out for God to rescue them. And sure enough, he had heard them and he had already answered. It was just going to take a few years for that baby that he sent to grow up and be able to be the rescuer that they needed, Moses. Generations later, they're exiled into Babylon and they're crying out, and God has already sent the one that he has promised he would, and that person had to grow up and become of age to then be the rescuer that he was destined to be. And then Jesus comes along the scene 400 plus years later, and once again they're in under oppression under the Roman government, and they're crying out for their to be rescued. And this time it isn't just a rescuer, lowercase r, a deliverer, lowercase d. It's the Messiah, the deliverer, capital M, capital D. It's the one that God had been promising all along, because he wasn't going to just rescue them from their temporary physical bondage and oppression by a physical army, but Jesus was going to come and rescue him from every spiritual and emotional and mental and physical problem that we've ever had. He is our true deliverer. He is our true Messiah. And so if you haven't caught it yet, in the song, each of the first 3 verses covers those time periods. So the verse 1 is talking from the perspective of a slave in Egypt, a Hebrew slave in Egypt. Verse 2 is sung from the perspective of one of the Babylonian exiles. Verse 3 is written from the perspective of just an average Jewish citizen under Roman government rule during the time when Jesus was born. And so in the chorus of each one, after each of those verses, in the chorus it sings, your God has heard your cry, and a child was born tonight. You're just going to have to wait a little while, but help has already shown up. It's just not in a way that you're going to recognize it yet, so hold on. Well, then I started thinking, well, what about now? And so verse 4 is written from a modern day perspective. The general person living alive today in modern America may not be under some oppressive rule of some foreign government or army, and yet spiritually so many of us, even Christians, are deceived and blind to how oppressed we are by wealth and finances and materialism. We've turned Christmas into something, so many people rant on this, I'm not going to spend more than a few seconds, but we've turned Christmas into, instead of a celebration of what Christ came to do, we've turned it into a materialistic festival of all kinds of things that it really has nothing to do with. And that's fine. I'm not opposed to that. I enjoy Christmas time. I enjoy singing Christmas songs, even the non-religious ones. I like decorating a Christmas tree and putting up colored lights, and I like giving gifts to people I care about, and all the different things that we do when we celebrate in modern society, the Christmas season. I'm okay with all that, but 99% of it doesn't have anything to do with Jesus and why he came. And so just the idea that we too are under oppression, it's just more subtle, it's more hidden, and maybe in that way it's more dangerous because we're not all crying out for help, for rescue. Rescue from the spiritual bondage that we're in, or rescue from the spiritual captivity that we're in. Our hearts have been exiled into a world system and out of a place of communion and fellowship and intimacy with God. And so verse 4 is seen from the perspective of a person who is struggling and frustrated, but not because they're feeling oppressed, but because everything that they have and all the wealth and all there's a line at the very beginning that says everything that we can dream or imagine is within grasp. With technology and wealth being what it is today, pretty much a person can have or do anything they want. And yet it goes on to say, isn't there more to this life than all these pleasures that we've tried? None of it satisfies. And yet in the verse they're not really that worried about it or concerned about it. They'll just keep spending more to find what they think they're going to find. They're under, I should say we, but the person singing this verse is under oppression and they don't even know it. And yet God still loves them and is watching out for them, has already sent the ultimate Messiah, Jesus Christ. But who knows, maybe he's also sent someone that he's going to use as a vessel for him to reach through, just like he did with Moses, and he did with King Cyrus later, and he's done with many other people, whether it's the prophets sending the message, or in modern terms, someone that's going to come along in your life that's going to speak the message of hope and freedom that Jesus offers, the message of healing and victory that is available to each and every one of us, even if we don't realize we need it. We all do. Well, I just spoke for a really long time, a lot longer than I thought I was going to, but hopefully that gives a better kind of insight into what this song is about. I realize that this is not going to ever become a classic Christmas song that men, women, and children of all ages love to sing for generations to come. It was never intended to be that. It was just an idea that came to me, and I just kind of put it down on paper and ran with it. And so I wrote this 5 years ago, and this is the first time that I think anybody's really ever heard it. I don't know that I've ever shared it with anybody, and I just decided it was time to put it out there and see what you think. So there is some hope in the song, because the chorus is all about who our true hope is, but the verses really do have a darker tone, and that was by design, because one, the title of the song, Christmas in Captivity, when you're in captivity, it's not always a positive thing. In fact, most of the time it is a pretty negative thing. But I was also kind of leaning towards the feeling and the imagery in some of the classic Advent type songs, like O Come Emmanuel, which is a very similar song in that it's singing through the refrain, or through the chorus, it's singing hope, a message of hope and light to those who are feeling hopeless and trapped and lost in the dark. So there's a dark tone to what they're feeling, but there's hope shining through if they can just recognize it and come towards the light, or reach out for that helping hand. Well, in a similar way, that's what this song is trying to accomplish, is bring hope. And by showing 3 different times in history, in specifically the Jews' history, the nation of Israel's history, but then bringing it into a modern day setting, there's hope. No matter what you're going through, there is hope. And hope isn't a thing, it's not a place, it's not an item you can purchase, or a feeling that you can achieve. Hope is a person, and his name is Jesus. And that's what Christmas is all about, is finding our identity in a relationship with him again. So thank you for watching this. If you actually watched all the way through to the end of this, you win 500 extra bonus points. You can cash those in with the link down at the bottom. Thank you. Merry Christmas.